Welcome to Mindfulness Manufacturing. My name is Trevor Blondeel. Spending 25 years in manufacturing, I discovered the real impact we have on turnover, communication, and the ability to manage change is how we show up. That's the essence of emotional intelligence. In each episode, we bring a guest or message to expand your skills, engage your people, and grow your organization. So let's jump in. On our podcast, Mindfulness Manufacturing, so much of it is around our brains and how we think, how we show up, how we make others feel. Some days, I think I've got things figured out and we're starting to understand our behavior and how we're thinking. And then the next day, I'm confused because I hear something different. So today, I have Dr. John B. Molidor, CEO and founder of the Brain-Based Leadership Institute. And he is a professor emeritus at Michigan State University's College of Human Medicine. So Dr. John, tell me, what is a manufacturer's brain?
So one of the things that we would want everybody to understand about any brain, but specifically in the area of manufacturing, here's a big point. It's not fully formed until you're about age 25. And so, people talk about the different generations and how they're coming into manufacturing or they're coming into the workplace and, they don't have this value or that value, or they do this or they behave this way. The first thing we need to know, their brain is not fully formed till age 25. And one way you can figure this out is if you have a child, if you have a niece or nephew or someone kind of the teenage years and they do something particularly stupid and you ask them that question, what were you thinking? And they go, I don't know. They're probably telling you the truth because their brain is not fully formed. So I think that's the first thing we'd want to know is that brains aren't fully formed until about age 25. The second thing is we have to figure out what's the function of the brain? Why do we even have a brain? So Trevor, when you were younger and somebody said to you, why do you have a brain? You probably said one or both of the following. You probably said, we have a brain in order to think, and then you might even gone to, well, it's to feel. Oh, maybe it's thinking to feel. Well, no, it's not. So that's the other thing. It's like, so why do we have this 1.4 kilogram, about 3 pounds of mass inside your skull? Why do we have it? Well, as it turns out, it's probably to manage or to regulate, or I'm going to say dole out energy. So it's basically about energy management, or how do you budget your body's management? And so the brain is always calculating that, because the last thing you probably want is at the end of the day, especially a long time ago, to totally run out of energy and then a predator comes on you, you got nothing. And so this is what the brain does. It's basically trying to figure out, how do I manage this energy expenditure? And so here's another thing I guess I'd want people to know from the manufacturing perspective. When given a choice, the brain is going to choose whatever has the least amount of energy. Going back to that point, it's trying to conserve its energy.
Are you saying at the end of the day, manufacturing deals with a lot of emotion? We're very excited. Every hour counts. Every cycle in the capital equipment that we're running to produce that high quality product, which we want with no defects. And there's a lot of decisions that go into that. What happens at the end of the day then? Because you're saying this energy management, as far as some people will say, well, I'm as sharp as I am at 5 o'clock as I am at 7 a.m. if I'm working day shift. How does that tie into this energy management?
So let's go back again, kind of the structure of the brain. So basically you have two hemispheres. And again, from a neuroscience perspective, we don't talk about your left brain or your right brain. It's left hemisphere, right hemisphere. It's then connected by this bundle of fibers called corpus callosum. And I'm pretty sure you're going to quiz all your listeners on that. So again, it's the corpus callosum that connects the two hemispheres. So the first thing we'd probably have you then think about is the right hemisphere. Again, we're going to reduce this to kind of very accessible stuff. Big picture. Left hemisphere, detail. So if I'm in manufacturing and I want to sort of talk about what's needed, I better always start, or the best thing to do is to do both. Give the big picture first and then give the details next. So what I talk about is then big picture. All right, we need to do this for the following reasons. Here's what we're trying to accomplish, blah, blah, blah. Then the details. This is how we're going to do it. If you only do one, you probably will lose people, because if the big picture, Okay, so what does that mean? But if you hit them with details right away, it's like, well, why am I doing all this stuff? It sounds like minutia. What are we trying to achieve? So we would say from a brain perspective, brain friendly, always give big picture, then hang the detail. Because when you do that, then whoever's hearing it can figure out, how should I allocate then my energy in order to move it through the day? So yes, I remain sharp as much as possible. Again, quick side note, brain's made up about 70% of water. You better be hydrating. If you're not hydrating, your brain is shrinking. If your brain's shrinking, you're probably not making great decisions. So again, we would say hydrate throughout the day. So as again, nobody can see this, but you can, because we're seeing each other. I have my water here, so I just try to hydrate. So if you are thirsty, drink. I mean, this is it. I mean, drink water. You don't want to drink that other stuff, but that's another issue. That's another issue. But in the manufacturing day, yeah, you probably want to be drinking that other stuff. But water would be a great thing for you to be drinking.
So lots of great tips in there. And the one I see, and I've done this in meetings, it's 3:00. People are starting to get tired, and put on a pot of coffee at 3:00 in the afternoon when we've been sweating on the floor, maybe. Not such a good idea. Keep that hydration, be disciplined, keep that water up. So basically what I'm hearing is, maybe in particular and later in the day, when we know that people are a little more exhausted, is be even more mindful around, take a little extra time, talk about that big picture, instead of just saying, hey, I need to make sure that the tips are changed and we have these PMs wrapped up specifically in the next 2 hours. Maybe just take that bigger picture of, hey, the next shift's coming in, there's a changeover coming up. So wider sense over the next 24 hours, that's why this tip change is really important now. And perhaps if we took a few more minutes, people would be more receptive. Is that what I'm hearing?
Exactly. So it gives kind of the big picture, it gives the why. Because remember, the brain is also a prediction machine. It's always trying to calculate. So if you tell the why, most people love that. Credible research that they did, if you use the word because, you get much greater compliance. So I would like you to try to do this because, just put in the word because, you'll actually, people go, oh, okay. And so remember, you have the classic conversations with child and parent. It's like, I want you to do this, kids. Why? Why? And then finally, what's the parent say? Because, or they even say, because I said so. We don't want to be that sort of top down, but versus the reason I'm bringing this point is because shift change, things don't get handed off right, or because it sets them up for success and we want to have full success. You're telling the reasons why by using the word because, and it helps the brain. It's much more brain friendly. The brain accepts it much more easily because it then, in the language they understand, the brain understands.
So simply just understanding how we're breaking that information out to everybody, having a little more patience. And it reminds me of training within industry, which was actually, I believe, taken out of either the Army or the Navy, which we apply to standard work. And one of the standards in showing someone standard work on a machine is that you say, you're going to put this part here, and this is why you load it this way. And this is why there's a hole here. And you have to have a why connected to every piece of standard work. So I didn't know there was brain science behind it, but it works. I know it works.
Clearly brain science behind it, because again, the big picture. The other one that we're discovering, which is kind of interesting, is while you're telling that, yes, you put here and then you have to adjust to this hole. There's you tell them the reason why, but you now also say, if you don't, it's sort of like the why not, is because then it shatters this, or this part becomes defective later on because it doesn't have certain integrity. So you explain the why, but you also can explain the why not. And the brain kind of likes that. I'm going to call it kind of symmetry. Why not? Another similarity would be people have their task lists, or some people call it a to-do list. I prefer the task list. Here's the task that you need to do. You probably need to create not task list. Don't do this, do this. Because remember, the brain, when given a choice, will choose the least amount of expenditure of energy. So here you make your task list, you have your number one priority, then your second, your third, and so on. The brain might start to look at it and like, oh, that number one, that's going to be a lot of work. That's a lot of energy. So how about I go to number two? Oh, that seems to be a lot of work too. And then you get down to like number 10. Call your buddy to see if they have tickets to whatever. It's like, I'm going to do that one, or yes. Rather than go talk to an employee about whatever that might be hard to do, why don't I just go over and then reward somebody because they're doing great? And so we tend to, again, the brain kind of likes this least amount of energy. A lot of things that we would say then in terms of then leadership, especially a manufacturer's brain in terms of leading, is make sure you're doing the most important task. And then you can reward yourself throughout if you want by an easier task because you've done the toughest task first. Then you reward yourself with an easier one. Or as you're doing it, may say, this is going to take a couple of hours. You can reward yourself in between, but you're then literally going, this is my number one task. I'm going to start there and then work. There's another little tip. As soon as you decide that you're going to do this number one task, do something within about 20 to 30 seconds of deciding that I'm going to do that task. Why? It focuses the brain. And when it focuses the brain, again, way more info than maybe it releases acetylcholine in the brain. And so this causes then more of a focus. And then what you want to do is then reward it. And again, you can have whatever your reward system is. And then you need time to process it, which is then rest or sleep that night. We also know most leaders and most manufacturers' brains are becoming sleep deprived. COVID has made this extremely difficult and that people are not getting the proper amount of sleep. So the sleep is the best thing you can do for your physical health, your mental health, your psychological health. Good sleep is very, very important. That's when then that neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself, that's when it occurs. But if you keep throwing stuff at people over and over and over, they're not going to get it. You need to give individuals time to process this, either in what we call rest or sleep, later on. Now you can actually plant the thought. So I want you to think about this tonight. I want you to think about it before you go to sleep. Of course, again, they may roll their eyes at you like, I don't think I don't want to be paying attention to you, Trevor, when I go to sleep. I want to think about better things than that. But it's that whole process, you're planning the thing of that, allow the brain to take in the information and rewire itself. Quick side note, the brain is the only organ you have that can rewire itself. It's amazing to me. Whereas, yes, your liver can change out and your spleen can change out and blah, 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 but it cannot rewire itself. The brain literally can rewire itself. Again, the old proverb, yes, you can teach an old dog new tricks, but you have to go through that stages of that. You have to be aware that you want to change, and then you have to have a little bit of agitation. Oh, it's going to be hard to do. Again, probably number one task. You get a little agitated. Then your focus is that acetylcholine, and then you do a reward, and then you do process. And you want to make sure you're doing it versus you just keep throwing stuff at your staff, employees, your group. You're just going to fatigue them.
Okay, so I'm going to translate this into some manufacturing scenarios. That's a lot of great stuff, Dr. John. And I had a leader that was running a plant, and we're going to put cameras in for safety, and that was new. And people love to have cameras on them, not. So I remember it was a conditioning where it was a long conversation, and the fact that it was brought up that we're going to look at cameras. That was 1 month. And the next month was another phase, and was this. I didn't realize that either, but there was a real brain conditioning there, and there's some resistance at it towards the end. But that's how I'm connecting to what I've seen work. I don't know why it worked, and you explained the why it worked. The other one that I work with clients, and I hear this question, is that I don't understand why this leader is just not focused and they're just not like closing anything out. And I'll look and they might have 20 tasks, or maybe there's 20 priorities. And I didn't know if it was individuals or if it's just everyone's like this. If we can break it down and basically help that leader, instead of saying they should know better and they should be able to do this, where I've always believed this long debate of, is a leader born or are they developed? And what I'm hearing right now is that it is plasticity. We can learn this, but how important is that? I mean, you can't give a leader just one task, but when I see people not have 20 choices on what to work on, it seems like there is more success. So what advice would you give to one leader in manufacturing to go to a second shift, and how does he communicate that?
So I think the key thing is that you can overwhelm people quickly. So we'll go back to the earlier part when we say the brain when given a choice. So Trevor, if I'm talking to you and I say, okay, so for the next shift, here's this and this and this and this and this and this, and all of a sudden your brain's going to start to go, What should I pay attention to? What should I focus on? Because I am giving that to you, probably have not given the focus. So I would probably say, Trevor, number one is this. If you can accomplish that, that's huge. Now, if you do that, here's number two. And I want you to do this sequentially. So I would literally will say sequentially. Now, most people, when you talk to leaders and they're given all this stuff, you really quickly find out that they're surrounding the most important stuff with the other things that probably don't need to be surrounded. Now, for example, safety first. Well, actually, that's no. It should be safety always, but that's sort of like so I would say to you, Trevor, within the concept of safety always, here's the first task. And then I'd give it, if you can complete that or the shift can complete that, now I want to go to number two. Here it is. If you do that, here's number three. Otherwise, if I throw 5, 6, 7, 8, your brain's going, which one's priority?
So would you say 3 is the right number?
3 is a good one. For some reason, the brain and people seem to resonate with 3. And here's what I would do. So this is some of the stuff that I love doing. Is like, I need the following 3 done. And if I could add one more, it would be, so I do 3 plus 1. But so it's like, here's the big 3. And if I could add one more, it'd be this. For some reason, adding the 4th one kind of cements the first 3. It's kind of a crazy thing. We're not quite sure why that is, but people tend to remember 3s probably because we think of our past, present, future, yesterday, today, tomorrow. We tend to,
interesting.
I think it's probably built in a little bit to our psyche in terms of 3s.
If I think to be on the floor and we're going hour to hour with challenges, I will hear I've heard myself say it and I hear other leaders say it. I really need you to do this, but before I forget, I should tell you this and this. So I'm not doing that to benefit the other person. I'm doing it for my own selfishness because I don't want to forget. So perhaps if we kind of shift our thinking to the receiver and not what does Trevor want to get across so he doesn't forget. I say, well, I did tell you there, after I told you those 4 other things, I did mention to you, so I didn't forget, so I didn't mention it. So what I'm hearing again is that we should be shifting our thought process to how are people receiving our information, not what do we want to get out of our mouths.
Exactly. And so a lot of times the reason you want to get it out of your mouth, again, your brain's kind of going, I want to offload this stuff as quickly as possible because then I'm sort of done with it. But the purposeful way or brain-friendly way is exactly as you just described. Take a moment, frame it, hang the details in. Big picture, then hang the details. By the way, and unfortunately, oh, by the way, seems to be that catch-all because later on I can come back to you and like, Trevor, oh, by the way, I told you, oh, by the way, and you didn't remember. It's like, yeah, but you just hammered me with, 6 things. How was I supposed to remember your, oh, by the way? So I like your framing of that. That makes a lot of sense to put it together that way.
I'm realizing my brain is pretty simple because I know I will catch others and they'll bring an important topic up and then they'll shift to something else. And so, this, and this. I'm like, well, hold on a minute. Were we just talking about this? Because I'm not smart enough to balance these 2 deep conversations. So it may not be my lack of intelligence. It may be just how our brains are hardwired.
It's how you're wired and how it comes in because the brain, remember, is going to be a prediction machine. It's always trying to predict the future. And because it's always trying to predict the future, you want to set it up in a way that your receiver or the person hearing it hears it within their experiences. So if I said to you, Trevor, remember the time we decided we were going to do it this way and it just was a disaster? Okay, that's a memory. Now I'm highlighting the memory then for you, or I can do it on the positive way. Trevor, remember the time we did this and we just crushed it. We did it so well. This is what I want to try to do in this new process. Now I've sort of tapped into your memory and that you hearing it, you're going to try to predict, well, yeah, it was successful. And now we try to do it. And then you can even ask for input too, if you want to. So what do you think that we did well? Or what do you think went well that we could then replicate in this situation? Those are very, very powerful. Because what most people are doing when you're going to introduce, especially anything new, is they're going, well, we tried that before.
Oh, yeah.
Work. And so now you want me to do it? Okay. But they're smiling and going, yeah. But their brain's probably going, that ain't going to work no matter what we do. So if I want them to be engaged, then I want to ask them, why do you think it didn't work? What can we do differently to make it work? Or what do we need to keep doing if it worked well in the past? Because that prediction, the brain's always trying to predict what's going to happen next. And so if you have a series of like bad stuff, then your audience or the people you're talking to is probably going to go, I don't think so, Trevor. I don't think this is going to work.
That's just an amazing reflection for myself. Oftentimes, the subject matter experts in a manufacturing plant outlast the leadership. So you have new leaders with experienced technical and operators and material handlers. And that is a daily word of, we've tried that before, or we used to do it that way. That helps me understand. I hope, and I assume the listeners are going to get that same benefit right there. That's just a gem of, hey, let's create a new story. And the typical response is, yeah, you can't always just say that's the way it was done. We got to move forward, but we're not really addressing how the brain works. And if you don't address the story of the past, and you don't take a little time and effort and understand that, hey, they have stories and our brains are predictive, and they do come back and they take everything that's been in the past, and all of a sudden, and that's going to make that quick decision. And you want me to do this when my brain has all these stories? You're crazy, man.
Exactly.
So no wonder we have resistance.
Exactly. And that's why the power of story, then, I mean, you allude to that. That's huge, especially in any type of culture in manufacturing, is what is the story? What is the culture? And so that we find that the organizations that seem to thrive is they're very clear on their culture. They're very clear then on their story. And that it's like, and if it's the story or culture is we gather input, or that safety always, or again, whatever part of the culture is their story, that becomes so critical to do it. One other thing I might mention is that, so the way the brain is also set up is it does things now, like you said, they have all these memories in there. So we tend to be either reflexive or deliberate. And so here's the best way to think about it. So when you started to learn how to drive, especially if you back in the day had to drive stick shift, or you had to drive or learn how to do a machine, it takes a lot of energy. It's very deliberative. That's why, again, the more explanation one can give, whether it be modeling it or showing them, demonstrating, having hands-on, allowing for failure. You need to also allow for failure, because you need to know what failure looks like. So it's deliberative. It takes a ton of energy. And so it's really intense. As it becomes habit, or then it moves over to reflex. You just do it. Like driving a car. Mm-hmm. Most, when you first learn it, where's the mirror? Where's the gas? Where's the brake? Where's the turn signal? It's everything. A lot. Now it's like, oh, do I even have my seatbelt on? You know, it's so reflexive. Why? The brain is always trying to shift everything to reflex, because it requires very little energy. And so if I'm teaching something or I'm showing something, I need to be aware that then it's going to cause the other person to have to expend energy. That's why I tell them the why we're doing this, so they can make a decision and they can then figure out, allocate energy.
I'm taking away the importance of just simply that big picture, to the details, to the stories. Man, I got to come back and re-listen to this. I just took in a lot of great information. Dr. John B. Molidor, thank you so much. What would be the last tip that you're going to leave us with our listeners today?
I think the one thing that probably our own culture has done is they've separated the head and heart, or the brain and heart, as if they're two separate entities. And so it's like, oh, that leader is soft, or is leading with his or her heart, or, oh, he's just so, they're not separate. They're connected. And so the wiring, if you will, in terms of then literally from your gut, if you will, up to your brain. I mean, it's incredibly fascinating. It's then the external, the physical, going again, all your senses back up to your brain, spinal cord, brain. It's just phenomenal. And so you don't have to be either or. You just need to be full. And again, my bias is that it's the brain. I mean, the brain is doing it. But if you feel something in your gut, actually, we find out there are neurons in your gut. They're communicating to your brain. And so trust the instincts, because it's a way of communicating. But if your brain's going, this ain't going to work, don't override that. You need to then trust that. So I would say it's fully integrated. We would talk about the brain, the spinal cord, and then the communication with all your senses and all your senses back. So that's touch, smell, taste, hearing, all that. It's all being processed in your brain. And the more you can make things for yourself and for others brain friendly, brain easy, you're going to have a much, much better outcome.
And there you have it. A better outcome, an easier day. Take these tips and have some fun. Hey folks, appreciate you taking the time to join us today. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone. Haven't subscribed yet? Do it now. Remember, if you want results, the key is increasing your awareness of how you show up.